This is Josh White with JW Math Tutoring. Today's video is going to focus on Section 4, the calculator section of the May 2023 SAT QAS exam. So let's go ahead and get right to it.
But life is a dream the calculus could never predict.
Just before we get started on the calculator section of the May 2023 SAT QAS, I just want to point out a couple things. First, for these problems, I like to show as many methods as possible to solve them. So therefore, the explanation of this video will take more time than you are allowed to complete this section of the test. So just be aware of that. That's because on some problems, I might show 2 or 3 different methods you could use to solve them. Whereas if you're actually taking the test in person, you would just ideally just solve it using one method and get your answer. Second, of course, if you like this video, please do click the thumbs up on it and subscribe to my channel, sign up for notifications as well. All right, so that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Problem number 1. Here you are given a scatter plot with some points and basically a line of best fit. But all it's asking for is basically what's the y coordinate for the x coordinate of, or x value of 3,700. So you just go over here to like 3,700, which is, between 3,500 and 4,000. A little closer to 3,500, go up to the line. It looks like it's probably going to be somewhere, right around here. So like 32, 33, and that's the only one that makes sense. So correct answer is letter B, no other work to do on it. Now going down to number 2 at the bottom of the page, this is just a basic unit conversion question. You're starting with milligrams and you're converting it to grams. So there are multiple ways you could do this. You could do basically, excuse me, what's known as the factor label method. So you could start with 3,300 milligrams and then you basically multiply. And down here, we're going to put 1,000 milligrams. And then up here, we're going to put 1 gram. And now the milligram units cancel out. And so you basically have just 3,300 divided by 1,000, which just comes out to 3.3. So the correct answer is going to be letter B. Now, if you're not familiar with that method, you could also just set up a proportion. So in other words, you could say 3,300 milligrams, X number of grams, and then over here you'd match up the same units. 1 gram is equal to 1,000 milligrams. All right. And then you could cross multiply and you're going to end up with just the same values that you're calculating in the factor label method. So in other words, if you cross multiply, you're going to get, 3,300 milligrams times grams equals 1,000 x milligrams times grams. The units will all just cancel out. And then divide by 1,000 and you get the same number, 3.3, when you solve for x. So that's just an alternate way to do it if you're not familiar with factor label, or otherwise known as dimensional analysis. Okay, back to the top. Problem number 3, very simple, straightforward question here. What's the y-intercept of this line? Well, this is just the point where the graph crosses the y-axis. So it's just 0, 1. You can just read it straight from the graph, and that's it. No more work to be done. All right, number 4, this problem here is basically kind of like a proportion type problem. It actually can be solved the exact same way for number 2. So they tell you, 1 square inch, 650 square glands. Okay, how many square inches would have 1170? So if you just set up a proportion, okay, it's like, all right, put the area on top and the number of sweat glands on the bottom, 1170. And then over here, we'll put the basically the conversion factor that we're given, which is the area, 1 square inch on top, and the 650 sweat glands on the bottom. So now you just cross multiply this. You get 650x equals 1170. You divide both sides by 650. And so for this one, it just comes out to basically an area of 1.8 square inches. So correct answer is going to be letter D, and that's it. Now, just want to also point out on this problem, you could also technically do this one by back solving, meaning that you could take 650, you could multiply it by the area, which is all of the answer choices here, and then you could see, okay, which one of these values gives you 1170. So if you use that approach, I mean, technically you can use process of elimination to figure out it has to be D, because notice 650 for 1 square inch. Well, if you now have like, almost double that or more than that, then you're going to need more than 1 square inch. Therefore, A, B, and C would be wrong just by, common sense, and you'd be left with D even without needing to calculate it. So just something else to keep in mind. All right, number 5, here we have a graph of a function, and this function is going to be decreasing exponential. It is letter D. So first of all, notice it's decreasing because as we go from left to right, the y values go down or get smaller. So that would rule out A and C. And of course, this is an exponential function because of the shape of the curve. To be a linear function, it just have to be a straight line, something like that. So for this one, correct answer is letter D, and we can move on to the next problem. All right, number 6, we have some dot plots here. They want to know which one has a median value less than 70. Okay, notice they tell us each one has 9 values. That means the median is going to be the 5th value. The way I know that is I do 9 divided by 2 and I get 4.5. Since I got a decimal, I round it up to the next whole number and 5. So my 5th value is going to be basically the median value. So you just go through the answers and you start counting and you're looking for the one where the 5th point, excuse me, will be less than 70. So for A, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is it less than 70? No. B, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, less than 70? No. C, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is it less than 70? Yes, it's going to be correct. And just to confirm with D, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, less than 70? No. Get rid of it. So correct answer for this one is going to be letter C. Now for question 7, this is one of the ones where they have, tables and they have some data. And here they want to know the height in meters of Blanca Peak. So this again is just another unit conversion problem. Just like we've already seen 2 of them already on the test, questions 2 and 4. So again, well, actually 4 wasn't a unit conversion, excuse me. 4 was one proportion one, but same basic idea. So again, if you do factor label for this, you can start with the 14,350 feet, and then they give you the conversion factor here. 3.28 feet will go on the bottom, 1 meter will go on top. The units of feet will cancel out, and then you're just doing 14,350 divided by 3.28. That's going to come out to 4,375 meters. So correct answer is going to be letter B. Again, you could also do a proportion for this one, where you set up, whatever it is, 14,350 feet on top, number of meters on the bottom, and then you set that equal to the number of feet. Let me just erase this and do it down here where it's visible. From the conversion factor, which is 3.78. So it would be, again, 14,350 on top, number of meters on the bottom. And then on the other side, you would put the 3.28 feet on top, and then meters 1 on the bottom. And then you cross multiply, and you end up doing the same exact operation, which is 14,350 divided by 3.28. So if you want to use proportions, that's fine too. Now for question number 8, here they want to know, so basically the highest peak for the Appalachian mountain ones. So notice that's the second, group right here. Okay. Uh, they want to know what percent greater it is than the lowest peak. So here you're going to use the percentage change formula. So first of all, the highest peak is going to be, looks like 6684 Mount Mitchell right here. And the lowest peak is going to be 6661. Notice these are actually in, kind of in order from highest to smallest. So percent change formula just says, basically we do, normally it's new minus old divided by old. So for this one, it would be the 6684 minus 6611 and then divided by 6611. Then you, of course, multiply it by 100% in order to get the percentage. Now, the reason that we do this, that we divide by 6611, is because the way it's worded is it says, the height of the highest is what percent greater than height of lowest. So you're comparing highest to lowest. So that's why the lowest is the old value, which goes here and here on the bottom. So if you just work this out, on your calculator, you get 73 for the difference. You divide that by 6611. It comes out to 0.01104. And then, of course, multiplying by the 100% gives you about 1.1%. So in other words, what this is saying is the highest peak has a height which is 1.1% more than, greater than, the lowest peak. Moving on to the next page, here we have some data sets for problem number 9. So comparing the median of these two data sets. For the first one, notice we have 6 total items. That means the median is going to be the average of items 3 and 4. So we would take whatever is the third value and the fourth value, add them, divide by 2. So that would just be 6 and 6. So the median for the first one is going to be 6. The second one has an odd number of items. Since it has 7, if you go ahead and count them up, that means the median is going to be the fourth value. So 1, 2, 3. So the median for this is going to be 6. Therefore, correct answer for this is just letter C. These two data sets will have the same median or middle value. All right, the one below that, number 10, they give this formula. It's got X and Y. X is how much isopropanol, Y is how much water is used. And then they give you the volume of isopropanol, i.e. they give you the value of X, and you're just plugging that in to find out how much water would be used. So in other words, you're plugging in the value for X and then solving for Y. And that's it to this problem. So 0.79 times 70, and then just 1.0, which is just 1, Y equals 100. So if you go ahead and solve this out, it's 55.3 plus Y equals 100. Y is going to equal 44.7. But notice here in the question, it's what is the approximate volume? So approximately 45 cubic centimeters. Letter A is going to be your correct answer. Also, you could have done this one with back solving. I don't think it's really that much quicker than doing, just plugging in and solving out the equation, but you could plug in 0.79 times 7 plus 1 times and go through the answer choices and see, does it equal 100? Okay, if it does, then yes, it's the correct answer. If it doesn't, ignore it and move on. All right, below that, problem number 11. For this one, there's multiple ways you could do this. I mean, first I'll show picking numbers. So let's say that there were 100 members of the House of Representatives that are in favor of bill. So in other words, I'm going to let B equal 100. So if you figure out, what percentage of members are in favor of the bill, well, we just would take 100 divided by 435, and that's going to come out to 23%. Technically, you divide that and then you multiply it by 100% to turn into percentage. So now you go through all of these answer choices and you plug in, 100 for B, and then you work them out and you see which one is equal to 23. So notice that answer choice B, the hundreds cancel and you get just 435. Well, that's wrong. Notice that in C, 100 over 100 is just 1. So you would get, again, 435. That's wrong. D, you're going to do 435 times 100 times 100. That's going to be, I don't, like 4,350,000 or something like that. That's wrong. So it's going to be answer choice A. And if you look at it, if you notice what happened, when I did the actual calculation here, right, To find the percentage, I just took the number that are in favor, I divided it out of the total, 435, and then I multiplied by 100 for the percentage. That's what's happening in answer choice A. You're taking the number in favor B, dividing it by 435, then multiplying by 100 for the percentage. So that's kind of like the theoretical way you could figure it out. But the correct answer is going to be letter A. All right, now question number 12, back at the top of the page. So you're given an equation here and it wants to know which equation has the same solution as this one. So the quickest, easiest way to do this is just to notice you can actually divide both sides by 10, and then that will give you x plus 120 equals 12. And when I go down through the answer choices, I see letter A right here, correct answer. However, if you did not recognize that, that's fine. Then you can go ahead and just solve out the equation, and you would get, 10x plus 1200 equals 120, and you get 10x equals negative 1080, and then you would get x equals negative 108. And now you just have to go through these answer choices and see, okay, which one of these equations has a solution of negative 108? Okay, well, it's going to be A because B, the answer is 10. That's wrong. C, the answer is 0. That's not negative 108. And D, the answer is positive 108, not negative 108. So you could just solve it out, get the value for x, and then see which answer choice has the value for x. If you don't recognize, just to divide by 10 initially. All right, next up, we have a graph here for problem number 13. Um, and they want to know when is the membrane potential closest to negative 70. So in this problem, all they're doing is they're giving you the y coordinate or the y value, and they're saying what is the x value or x coordinate which corresponds to it. So there are technically 2 points on the graph where it's equal to where the membrane potential is negative 70. The first point is right here at the starting point or 0, but notice that's not an answer choice. And then if you go across, the second one is going to be, right here. Um, and then also notice at the very end, and actually, sorry, I was misspoke. There are actually 3 points where it approaches or equals negative 70. And then the third one's going to be all the way over here on the right. So notice you have like 0 as one possibility, but that's not an answer choice. You have 1 point, I don't know, 3, 1.2, 1.4, we don't know exactly is another. That's not an answer choice. And then the third one is going to be this one over here right at 5. So of the possible answer choices, which are 2, 3, 4, 5, okay, 5 is obviously the closest one, which equals negative 70. So correct answer is letter D. All right, moving on now to questions 14 and 15, which deal with this function, this equation that you're given. So problem number 14, they want to know which graph represents this model, which this is just, again, this is a linear equation, just like a line. Think about it, y equals 4.3x plus 19. So there are multiple ways you could do this one. Okay. So first of all, you could notice that the y-intercept is 19. So if we scroll down and look at some of these graphs, notice that C and D are wrong right away. They do not have B values or y-intercept values of 19, okay? So get rid of those 2 right off the bat. Now you're down to these 2. So at this point, you could graph the line on your calculator and compare, or the way I would do this is I would call what I call point matching. So pick a value for x. I'm going to use 10. Plug that into the equation. Figure out what the corresponding y value is, and then go to the graphs and see which has that same y value. So if you plug in 10, 4.3 times 10 plus 19, which is just 43 plus 19, it comes out to be 62. So when I go to 10 on these graphs and I go up, okay, this point or this point. So which of these is equal to 62? Well, this one looks like it is pretty close, whereas this one, it's at like 22, 21, so it's like nowhere near 62. So this one is wrong. Correct answer is going to be letter A for this problem. Now, for number 15, what does the 4.3 mean in this context? So notice 4.3 represents the slope. So the slope is essentially when you have these linear functions, linear equations, the slope is the change in the y variable or the output for every 1 unit change in x. So here, x is the number of years, and uh, the y, or the output, in this case, technically the letter C, is annual soybean use. So 4.3 is basically saying that, like, there's a change or an increase, because it's positive, of 4.3, and I guess the unit would be millions of metric tons of soybeans, like per year or per 1 year, between whatever the years that are given here, 95 and 2014. So when you look at the answer choices, A says each year, China used 4.3 million metric tons. No, that's not true. We just saw that, in year 10, which I guess would be 2005, they used 62, million metric tons. Again, this slope represents the change or an increase or a decrease. In this problem, it's an increase. When you look at C, B, sorry, I guess we'll go to B next because this is the correct answer. Each year, China's annual use of soybeans increased. This is the key, increased by 4.3 million metric tons. So 4.3 million metric tons, there was a change, there was an increase, and then the annual is where the per year or per 1 unit change in the X comes in. C, they used 4.3 million metric tons in 1995. That's false because in 95, X would be 0, and they would actually use 19 because that's what the y-intercept is. So that's not even a true statement. I mean, it doesn't explain what the 4.3 is, but the point is the statement itself isn't even true. And then D, again, doesn't even, make sense. It's not talking about an increase or a decrease on a per 1 unit change in X. So correct answer is letter B. All right, now for number 16. Here we have some functions again. This first one, um, they give you for the revenue function, they give you the value for revenue 1425, and they just want to know how many bales of hay would be sold. So X in these equations represent number of bales of hay. So 16, all you're doing is you're plugging in 1425 for the revenue, and then you're just solving for X. So you're literally just dividing that by 4.75. Now, if you do this, the answer comes out to 300. So that's it. You would have to sell 300 bales of hay in order to earn revenue of 1425. And you could also have back solved to this, right? You could just take the 100, plug it in. Does it equal 1425? No. Okay, take 300, plug it in. Does it equal 1425? Yes, correct answer. All right, now for 17, for the profit function, how many must be sold to earn a profit of 10,000 or more? And they tell you here profit is revenue minus cost. So basically, you take the two equations here, and then you're going to subtract them. So we have 4.75x, that's the revenue, minus the cost, which is the 50,000 plus 0.75x. So that entire expression, keep it there so we can see it. Okay, so this entire expression is equal to the profit, and we want the profit to be $10,000 or more. That means we want the profit to be greater than or equal to, $10,000. So you're going to take this expression, simplify it, and then make it greater than or equal to 10,000. So notice 4.75x minus the 0.75x inside would be 4x. I mean, they all have 4x in them, so hope you recognize that, that you're not going to add them together. Technically, you're subtracting. And then the negative sign out here distributes and makes it minus 50,000. So this is the simplified version of the profit. And again, we want it to be greater than or equal to $10,000 because it says profit of $10,000 or more. So notice this doesn't quite match the answer choices we have. I mean, we can eliminate C and D right away because they have the plus 50,000. We want it minus. But now if you look at it, if you just want to switch the sides of an inequality, basically what happens is you can flip the sides, but you have to remember to flip the inequality sign as well. So it still ends up kind of pointing the same direction. So the correct answer for this one is going to be letter A. 10,000 less than or equal to 4x minus 50,000. Moving on to the next page, we have some polynomial expressions here. So this is basically just, foiling out the first uh, parentheses, meaning write it twice, and you're going to get x to the fourth. Now I'm just going to combine them, but it's going to be 4x squared and 4x squared is going to be 8x squared, and then for the last you're going to get 16. Now for the other parentheses, this is technically a factored difference of squares. So when you multiply it out, it's going to be x squared minus 2x plus 2x minus 4. And you see how like the middle terms will cancel out. So you have x squared just minus 4. Now, if you just combine these, so we have an x to the fourth, 8x squared plus x squared, we have plus 9x squared, 16 minus 4, we have plus 12. So the correct answer for this one, x squared to the fourth plus 9x squared plus 12, letter D. You could also technically do picking numbers for this one, where like you pick a value for x and you plug it in and then you work out like what the numbers are and everything. And then you could go through the answer choices and plug that value in. I mean, you do something easy, ideally like one. But the problem is you can get multiple answer choices that give you the same value, and then you'd have to repeat the whole process. But that is something you can also technique you can also use when you're trying to find um, equivalent expressions like you're doing here. Okay, problem number 19, system of linear equations. How many solutions does this system have? So multiple ways you could do this. The answer I will tell you is going to be 0. So here are the different ways you could go through this. First, if you notice, these have the same slope but different y-intercepts. That means these are going to be parallel lines which will never intersect, and therefore there will be no solution or 0 solutions. Second method, you could just set these equal to each other and solve them. In other words, technically you're doing substitution. And then when you go try to solve it, you get 1 equals 3. These two numbers are never equal to each other. So that's another clue, or that's how you know that it's no solution, that the answer is letter A, 0. Third method, go to the calculator, graph out the lines, and you'll see on the calculator, one of them has an intercept of 1 here, one's an intercept of 3, and then they each have slopes of 4, so they're going to be parallel lines and therefore no solution or 0 solution. So 3 different ways you could do this one, but the answer is letter A. Now for number 20, down here at the bottom, this one, there are also multiple ways that you could do this. So it says, okay, we want an inequality. Basically, it wants to know which values of x for the graph of this function are above the x-axis. So obviously, one way you could do this is you could just go to the calculator. Easiest way, I would say, go to the calculator and just graph it out. So I'm going to just graph 3x plus 3. Okay, so we want, excuse me, the values of x for which basically the graph is above the x-axis. So if you notice here, right around -1 is where the x-intercept is. So everything to the right of that is above the x-axis, i.e. y value is greater than 0. So the answer is just going to be x is greater than -1, letter C. So again, method 1, go ahead and graph it on the calculator. Um, Method 2, you can just set up a basic linear inequality. So it's like 3x plus 3. And again, this is where you have to realize that above the x-axis means you want the y value, which is what this left side is equal to, greater than 0. So if you just solve this out, divided by 3, x greater than negative 1. Okay, so that's method 2. Method 3, you could also back solve it. Like you could go through some of these answer choices and you could plug them in, but the problem is there are overlapping values between them. In other words, if you like chose x equals 2 and you plugged that in, okay, 3 times 2 is 6, 6 plus 3 is 9. Would not 2 comma 9, would that be above the x-axis? Yes. So notice that meets A and it also meets C. However, it does not meet D because 2 is not greater than 3, and it does not meet B because 2 is not less than negative 1. So then you'd have to pick another point to help distinguish between 3 and negative 1 where they don't overlap. So you'd have to pick like, I don't know, -5 or like +7 or something. You'd have to pick one of the points that's in only one of the inequalities but not the other and plug that in, and then that would allow you to eliminate A and just be left with C. All right, now back at the top of the page, problem number 21. So here we have a graph. This is a decreasing exponential function. We already saw one of those earlier in the section. And they tell us the half-life of this is 5.27 years. So half-life is just the amount of time it takes for the amount of some substance to basically decrease by half, or to be divided by 2, essentially. Multiplied by 1/2 divided by 2. Okay, so it says, what is the mass after 10.54 years? So what you have to recognize is 10.54 years is going to be equal to 2 half-lives because one half-life is 5.27 years. So if you double that, you would get 10.54. So therefore, what this question is really asking is how much is left after um, 2 half-lives? So we go on the graph, we go to where 2 is. So, what's the mass remaining of this substance after 2, when x is equal to 2 half-lives? Well, it's like between 1 and 2, so the only possible answer choice is letter B, 1.25, and that's it. Again, the tricky part is figuring out that the 10.54 years, you have to convert that to the number of half-lives in order to look at the graph. All right, 22. This one, there are multiple methods you could use to solve this. So one method is to go ahead and graph out all of these functions. Well, these are equations, but if you set them equal to y, then you'd have a function. But to graph all these out on the calculator, and then you're going to be looking for the one function that does not cross the x-axis anywhere. When we talk about a quadratic equation or any equation having no real solutions, that means it has no x-intercepts, it has no roots, it has no zeros. So therefore, when you graph it out, it is not going to cross the x-axis. It's going to be completely above it, essentially, because if it were below it or if it were on it, then it would have 1 or 2 solutions, real solutions, or x-intercepts. Instead, we're looking for the one that only has complex solutions, complex zeros. So one method would be to use the graphing calculator and get it that way. Now, it's going to take you a little while because you have to start with A and plug that in, and then start with B and graph that one, and C, and so on and so forth. So I'll just show you. It's going to be answer choice C, and I'll just graph it out to confirm. Okay, so notice here we have the graph of it. And it does not cross the x-axis anywhere. That means it has no x-intercepts. Therefore, it has no real solutions. It has 2 solutions, but those 2 solutions are complex numbers, not real numbers. Okay, so that is method 1. The second method is to use the discriminant, basically the part of the quadratic formula that's under the square root, and calculate that for each answer choice, the b squared minus 4ac. So again, it's going to end up being c, Sorry, and you're going to look for which one of these has a discriminant value which is less than 0. Remember, if it's equal to 0, that means there's one real solution, basically a double root. If it is greater than 0, that's when you have two real solutions. So if you go ahead for C and you plug in b squared minus 4 times a times c, you get 3 squared is 9, and then the 4 times 3 is 12 times 3 is 36. So you get 9 minus 36, that's negative 27. That is less than 0. Therefore, there will be 0 real solutions. There will be two complex solutions, but no real solutions. So the correct answer choice is going to be letter C. And those are the two primary ways of of solving it. Now, problem 23 at the top of the next page. There are multiple ways to solve this problem. So the first method I'm going to show you is basically using picking numbers, and then after that I'll talk about like the theory kind of behind it. So first of all, notice that they want to know which equation here is not true. Okay, so if we look at answer choice A, all right, here we have angle x. The sine of this angle is equal to its opposite side over the hypotenuse. Therefore, the sine of x would be equal to 42 over 59. Answer choice A is true. Therefore, we would eliminate it as the correct answer to the problem because the problem again says which one is not true. All right, now for the other three choices, here's what I would do, and it's technically not even picking numbers. It's really, what I'm going to do is figure out the exact value of x, and then plug that into the formulas and see which of these statements is not true. So all we have to do is notice if we have the equation right here, sine x equals it. So if you do inverse sine, to both sides, you would get the inverse sine of 42 over 59 is equal to the angle, measure of angle that is labeled x. So if we do that on the graphing calculator, all right, looks like I'm in radians mode, so give me 1 second to change to degree mode. And now I'll just, okay, there we go. 45.4 degrees approximately, okay? So now I'm just going to go through. So again, this one's already wrong, so cross it back out. I'm just going to go through and calculate the other three answer choices and see which one is not true. So I'm going to do the sine of 90 minus the 45.4. Okay, is that equal to 42 over 59? So I'll just divide here 42 over 59. All right, now it's pretty close, but notice it's not quite like it's not quite the same, meaning the equation is not true. So this could be our answer. I mean, we do want to double check and make sure it's not due to rounding. So I'm going to check the other two just to make sure that the other two are incorrect. Or sorry, that the other two are correct and therefore not the answers to the problem. So now I'm going to do the cosine of 90 minus the 45.4. Okay, notice now I get 0.71202. That is very, very, very close to 0.71186. And if I had used the exact amount, in other words, 45.386811176, I should have gotten the exact same value as, 42 over 59. So letter C is a true statement. Therefore, we can eliminate it from the answer choices. And now let's look at letter D. So we got the sine of 90 minus 45.4, and then subtracting from that the cosine of 45.4. Okay, that's 0. That's obviously not equal to 0.71186, but whatever. Okay, so we can eliminate that. And the correct answer for this problem does turn out to be letter B. So Here is kind of the theory behind this. If you look at this triangle, okay, we have this angle down here in the bottom right corner, which is x. So this angle up here just turns out to be 90 minus x, because in a right triangle, you have the right angle, and then you have two acute angles that together add up to 90. So if one of them is x, the other has to be just 90 minus whatever that value is. So when you look at the other answer choices, specifically I'm talking about C and D, the cosine of 90 minus x, that's going to be the cosine of this angle up here. And the cosine of this angle is going to be equal to its adjacent side. So now, when in terms of the 90 minus x angle, we have the adjacent side of 42 over the hypotenuse of 59. So letter C is true, based on the 90 minus x angle up here. Therefore, it's not the correct answer to the problem. Also, if you look at now letter D, okay, the sine of 90 minus x. So we have the 90 minus x angle here at the top. The sine of that is going to be equal to the opposite over hypotenuse. So I don't know exactly what this third side is here. I mean, we could use Pythagorean theorem to figure it out, but you don't need to. But it's going to be the opposite side over the hypotenuse. But notice if I do the cosine now of angle x down here in the bottom right, the adjacent for this angle, x, is the same O. It's the same side which is opposite the 90 minus x. It's this side down here, and then it's going to be over again the hypotenuse. So the point is these two expressions right here are the same. Therefore, when you subtract them, you get 0, and that makes the statement true, which means it is not the correct answer to the problem. So that's kind of like the theory behind why C and D are not the correct answers, because they are both true. But the easiest way I think to do this is to just calculate the value of x and then plug that into the answer choices to see which ones are or are not true. All right, now moving on to question number 24. So started off here with 1,000 wolves. Um, in 2008, it was 190% more than the 1,000 it started with. So how many were there in 2008? So basically, you're just taking 1,000, multiplying it by 1.9, because 1.9 is the decimal equivalent of 190%. And that would tell you in 2008, there would be 1,900 more than or greater than the number in 76. So to find how many total, you have to take the 1,000 you start with and add to it the 1,900. So the correct answer is going to be 2,900. So again, the 190% greater means that we started at 1,000, we increased by 1,900, we end up at 2,900 total. Correct answer, letter C. For question number 25, we have a quadratic function and we're told some information about its vertex. And then we're also told one of the x-intercepts the graph and they want to know what the other one is. So basically what you have to know for this one is that, and I'll kind of draw this out just to show you. So the vertex is at -2, 5. Okay, so -2, and you go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just estimate it. Okay, one x-intercept is at -7/3, 0. Now, -7/3, if you go ahead and just divide that out, it's basically uh, -2 and 1/3, or like -2.3 repeating. So that means it's just going to be to the left of -2. And of course, it's going to be down here at 0. So like 3 would be way over here. Okay, so the shape of the graph is going to look something like this. The other vertex, or excuse me, the other x-intercept has to be to the right of the vertex to make your symmetric quadratic function, your symmetric parabola. So first of all, like if this is -2 and then right here it's like -2 and 1/3, a couple things. The C and D are going to be out because they are obviously going to be like 1/3 is going to be like over here between 0 and 1. And like 7/3 is going to be like way over here between 2 and 3. Like those are not going to be symmetric graphs because the x-intercepts are symmetric with respect to the vertex, i.e. same distance away. So like C and D are just out right away. And notice -13 thirds would be, that's like -4 and a third, that's going to be way over here. So if you had the x-intercept over here, like that doesn't make any sense. That's not what a quadratic function looks like. So you can actually eliminate A, C, and D just by kind of like drawing a picture out and estimating. But just to confirm that the how you get the correct answer of B, basically you start at -2, and to get to the 1x intercept, the given one, you move to the left by 1/3. So now to get to the other x-intercept, you're going to move to the right by 1/3. So you start at -2 for your x value, you move to the right by 1/3, and technically that's going to give you -5/3. I mean, it's -6/3 plus 1/3, -5/3, and you could just do that fraction, addition, simplification on the graphing calculator. But the whole idea is the two x-intercepts are symmetric um, with respect to the vertex, specifically the x-coordinates of all of them. So if one of them is 1/3 of a unit to the left of it, the other will have to be 1/3 of a unit to the right of the x-coordinate on your vertex. Now, question 26, here we have two box plots. So which of the statements must be true? Okay, so I'm going to start with number 2 first, the median, because the median in a box plot is always the line in the middle of the box, okay? So the median value is always given in a box plot. So when you look at these, you can clearly see the median for x, which looks like it's at 5, is less than the median for y, which looks like it is at 6. So 2 is absolutely correct. All right, so at this point, we're down to basically B or C. So the question is, what about statement 1? The mean of dataset X is less than the mean of dataset Y. So this is actually impossible to determine because we don't know exactly how the values are distributed. We know that for X, they go from 2 to 9, and for Y, they go from 3 to 9, but they don't know, between those numbers, how many there are within the specific, at this each specific value. We know that like 25% of the values are between, are from 2 to 4, but we don't know if, they're all at 2 and there's like none at 3 and none at 4, or if they're all at 3 and none at 2 and none at 4 and so on. So we cannot determine anything about the mean just from what we're shown here in the box plot. So the correct answer for this is going to be letter B. Now for 27, below it, we have an exponential function. And basically, they're giving us some information, and you're just asked to determine what the general form of the equation looks like. So here, since it's decreasing by 20%, if you think about it, general form of an exponential equation, I usually like to write it out as like y equals a times 1 plus or minus r to the t or to the x, where a is your initial amount or starting amount, R is your like basically your growth rate or your decline rate, and then T is like your time or whatever. So first of all, a couple things. Um, since it's decreasing by 20%, that means that like it first of all, decrease means it's minus, and that means the decline or decrease rate is 20%. So inside the parentheses, it's going to be 0.8. So right off the bat, these two are incorrect. Now, if you're trying to determine which one of these is the correct answer, all we have to do is just take 2 and plug it in for x, and then see which one of these gives 16 as our y value. They tell us right here. So if you notice, for the first one, you're going to have an exponent of, 2 minus 2, which will end up being 0. Whereas for the second answer choice, you're going to have 2 plus 2. So for the first one, you have 0.8 to the 0, which is just 1. So 16 times 1 is 16. The second one, you're going to have 16 times 0.8 to the fourth. That is not going to equal 16. It's going to equal something less than 16. So cross that out. Correct answer is going to be letter A. Okay, and that's all really that you have to do. Notice that if you tried to use the back solving approach first, in other words, you tried to plug 2 in for x initially, you would end up crossing out B and D, but you would be left with A and C, and then you would have to look at them to determine that A is correct because A is a 20% decrease, whereas C represents an 80% decrease. All right, now question 28 at the top. The correct answer for this one is just going to be letter A. And the whole reason is because a smaller margin of error corresponds to a larger sample size and vice versa, meaning a larger margin of error corresponds to a smaller sample size. That's just a basic kind of fact or property that applies to surveys or statistical sampling. So that's something just to memorize, and that's, for the test. That's it. Now, for question number 29, we have a circle. We're told its center. We're told a point lies in the circle. What's the equation of the circle? So first of all, notice the center is negative 3, 4. That means h is equal to negative 3 and k is equal to 4. So the general format's going to be h minus negative 3 squared plus y minus 4 squared equals something. So it's going to be x plus 3 squared plus y minus 4 squared. Right off the bat, get rid of a, get rid of c. Okay, so now we're down to these two answer choices. So how long is the radius of this circle? So we can just find the distance between these two points. Because if you think you just draw like a quick little picture here, you have the center at negative 3, 4. You have a point at negative 2, 1, right? So you can get the distance either by using the distance formula or by just basically counting and measuring, thinking of Pythagorean theorem, right? So in other words, from negative 2 to negative 3 is 1. From positive 1 to positive 4 is up 3. So how long is this, hypotenuse? That's basically the radius value of the circle. So 1 squared plus 3 squared equals x squared. 1 plus 9 equals x squared. 10 equals x squared, or x equals root 10. So that means that the radius is the square root of 10, or more importantly, the square of the radius, which we already found in the previous step, is just 10. So the correct answer here is going to be letter D. Because in the standard form equation, it's, x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. So again, correct answer is letter D. Now for problem number 30, here you have a table of some values for a quadratic function, and it wants to know where x reaches its minimum. So the thing is, two of these points here are x-intercepts because they have y values of 0. Okay, notice right here. So it's like if you would plot these out, this 2 zeros right here, 4 zeros right here, and then it also goes through like 6, 8, which is like whatever, way up here, right? So if you were to do a rough sketch of this quadratic function, it has to look, something like this. So the point is the minimum value is going to be at the vertex, and the vertex is obviously going to be between the two x-intercepts. And remembering from the previous problem that we just talked about, the two x-intercepts are symmetric with respect to the vertex. Or another way to think about that is the x-coordinate of the vertex, i.e. your h value, is equal to the average of your two x-intercept values. So you just take 2 and 4 and you average them, and you get 6 divided by 2, which will be 3. So that's just going to be the correct answer. So therefore, correct answer is going to be letter C, 3. The minimum value will occur at the vertex, and the x-coordinate of the vertex is equal to the average of your two x-intercept values. All right, now for 31, this is the first one from the grid-in section. Here we have a chart with a bunch of bar graphs on it. And we know what's the probability of selecting an album that was released in 1964. So all we have to do for this one is just take the total number of albums from 1964, which is 7. That's going to go on the top of our probability. And then on the bottom, we're going to put the total number of albums, which they've already told us is 20. So the correct answer for this is just 7 divided by 20. Or you could also grid it in as its decimal equivalent of 0.35. So either of these answers would be correct. All right, at the top of the next page, we have problem number 32, and this is just a basic linear inequality that you're going to set up and solve. So the cost to form team is $180 per team member. So that's just essentially like, 180 times X, where X is going to be the number of team members plus the one-time $25 fee. And if the maximum they can spend is $925, you want to set this total amount of money for the team less than or equal to 925. So we just go through and solve this. We get 180x is less than or equal to 900. And then you just divide by 180. X is less than or equal to 5. So the correct answer for this problem is just going to be 5. Basically, 5 is the maximum number of team members that you can have on the team to spend at most $925. All right, now below at 33, you have a system of linear equations. And of course, there are multiple ways that you could solve this one. Probably the quickest way is to just go ahead and do elimination, because if you add these as they're given, just adding down the columns, you just get 5x equals 35 and then x equals 7. So you have your correct answer right there. Of course, you could also go to the graphing calculator and plug it in on the graphing calculator. So I'll just show how you do that quickly. We have to go to the matrix menu, and we need a 2 by 2 matrix first. And we're going to put in the coefficients of the x and y terms. Okay, then we raise that to the negative first power. By the way, if you're not sure how to solve a system of equations on a TI-84 model calculator using matrix properties, check out my other videos on calculator hacks. It'll show you how to do it. And then we need to enter in a 2 by 1 matrix. And now we're going to enter the two numbers on the right, the 18 and the 17. Okay, so notice here we get our answer 7, comma, negative 0.75. So the answers it gives us, the top one is whatever the first variable would be, which in this case it is x. Second one would be our y value, but we're only concerned with the x. So this is just an alternate method you could use if for whatever reason you wanted to double check your answer or you forgot how to solve this, using elimination. All right, for number 34 at the bottom, here we have basically a bar graph or a histogram. And we want to know how many elements have at most 4 valence electrons. So obviously that's going to be 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. That would basically, when we talk about at most 4, we're talking about basically like the number of electrons less than or equal to 4. So we just add up these two values together. 6 plus 4 is 10, and that's the answer. No other work for that problem. Back to the top of the page, number 35. Here you have a radical equation. They're asking for the value of 3x. So the quickest way is just to add the 2 to the other side, and then of course divide by 5. And then once you get down here, of course, you can just square both sides. And so now the square root and the squared cancel out, so you just have 3x on the left, and on the right side you have 9. So the correct answer for this one is going to be 9. However, if you forgot about that and you just instinctively went ahead and solved it, I mean, it's just one more step, divide by 3, you get x equals 3. Just remember, you have to take 3 and then you have to plug that in for x and multiply it by 3. In other words, don't put down 3 as your answer. Remember, they're asking not for the value of x, but for the value of 3x. So correct answer for this one is 9. Now, for 36, directly below that, this looks like it's a very difficult problem, but it's actually not that bad, because if you take the equation on the right here, okay, and you split up the fraction, the 2x over ty, and into the following. If you make it 2 over t, say that's one fraction, and then make the other fraction x over y. Now, what you notice is that, oh, x over y is given in the problem as 8. So you can just erase that, and you can just replace it with the number 8. So now this equation here, which has like x and t and y in it, might look complicated, really just simplifies to 16 over t equals 160. So now you can go ahead and solve this. You can either think of it as cross multiplying, or you can multiply on both sides just by t to get it out of the denominator. Then you get 16 equals 160t. Divide by 160 on both sides. T is going to equal either 1 over 10, and so you could enter that fraction in, or you could also enter in the decimal equivalent of 0.1. Okay, so either answer would be correct. Now for 37 below it, where you have this table um, basically of like different groups and split up by different age categories. So here it wants to know, what's the probability of selecting someone from group A, given, so this is technically a conditional probability, that the participant is at least 10 years of age. So how many total participants are there who are at least 10 years of age? So that would be all the participants that are 10 to 19 and all the participants that are also 20 and older. So in our probability, fraction, the total number of outcomes, i.e. total number of people to choose from, is going to be 120. So that goes in your denominator. Now, what's the probability that the participant would be from group A? Well, there's 18 people that are 10 to 19. There's 22 people that are 20 and older. So there's 40 total favorable outcomes. So in other words, that's the number that goes on top of the fraction. So now you would just want to simplify this, reduce it down. So first of all, just divide by 10, get rid of the zeros. And then 4 over 12 is just going to simplify to 1 over 3. So you could enter that as your correct answer, or you could also enter in 0.333 since it's a repeating decimal. So either of those would be correct. Now, for the last one, problem number 38. This is a fairly tricky question, although it's actually not as difficult once you actually work it out as it might appear. So here's the thing. You know that the ratio of AB to BC is 4 to 1. So like, say this is 4 and say this is 1. Okay? That means that the diameter for AB, basically, like the diameter would be 4, and for AC, the large circle, the diameter technically would be 5. Now, those aren't the exact values, but I'm just using them to kind of show like the scale factor essentially between them. So those would be those would be the diameters. But now if you want to think about it in terms of radius, because this question is asking about area, and area we calculate using the radius. So to get the radius, you could just cut each of these in half. You could say that the ratio, like the radius of AB, the small one, would be 2, half the diameter, and the radius of the bigger circle, AC, would be 2.5. Because basically what we're going to do is we have the area of the small circle. We're going to use that value and the ratio of the radii to figure out the area of the large circle. Then we're going to subtract the two, and that'll give you the shaded area that they're asking for in the problem. So now that we have that, basically here's the thing. So formula for area of a circle is pi r squared. Notice that the r is squared. So the ratio of the two radii here, 2 to 2.5, just say hypothetically, those aren't the exact values, but we can just use them because they will represent, kind of like the ratio between them. When we look at comparing that to the area, what we have to do is we have to take this ratio and we have to square it. Because again, in the area formula, the radius, is squared. So what I'm saying is the radius of one circle to the radius of another circle is 2 to 2.5, or you could also think of it as 4 to 5. It's basically 0.8 to 1. Therefore, the ratio of their areas is not going to be 2 to 2.5. It's not going to be 4 to 5. It's not going to be 0.8 to 1. It's going to be the square of those values. So in other words, it's really going to turn out to be 4 to 6.25, or you could if you used 4 and 5, which you technically can do, it would turn out to be 16 to 25. Or it would be zero point 0.8 squared, which is 0.64. So it'd be 0.64 to 1. So now you can take this 4 to 6.25, which is the ratio of the areas, small circle on top, large circle on bottom, and you can set that equal to the actual area, which is 72, small circle on top, x, large circle on bottom. So now you just go ahead and solve this out. You get 4x equals 450, x equals 112.5. So 112.5 is the area of the large circle, the circle with the diameter of AC. So the shaded area now is going to be 112.5 minus 72. So you go ahead and you do that and you get 40.5. So now so that's basically your answer right there. So you could enter it in as a decimal, most likely what you're going to do. You technically could also enter it in as a fraction, and this you would probably just do it on the calculator. So you can convert it to 81/2, an improper fraction, and you could also enter that. But again, just to briefly review, I found the ratio of I did the diameter of small to large, and then I found the ratio of the radius from small to large. And then I squared the relationship, the ratio of the two radii. And then once I got that, that is basically this right here is basically the ratio of the areas of the two circles. And then I set up a proportion and set that equal to the actual numbers of the two circles, the areas of the two circles, one of which is given, one of which we're solving for. You solve for the area of the large circle, subtract area of large, minus area of small, and then that gives you the shaded area overall. Okay, so that was the May 2023 QAS, the calculator section. You have any questions or comments or anything, feel free to leave them on the video below. Otherwise, if you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and sign up for notifications as well. And also be on the lookout for more SAT and ACT related math content.